everybody. My name is Ravi Kurani, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sutro. We're developing Internet of Things for water. And more importantly, I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. This panel is Challenges and Opportunities in IoT. And more importantly, thank you so much for joining us on stage today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the mic to our three panelists, and so they can quickly give you an update and kind of what their backgrounds are and what they're working on. Go ahead.
Hi, it's great to be here. My name is Junaith Shahabdeen. I'm the CEO and founder of Zan Compute. Zan Compute is a building IoT solution that's focusing on custodial services, automating custodial services. Custodial services is a $120 billion industry that has remained manual. There's a lot of inefficiencies in there, and there is a lot of opportunities for IoT to provide a solution that can transform that industry. Right, so we install sensors that goes on garbage bins, towel dispensers, and so on, bring that data back to our cloud service, and provide actionable recommendations to the facility managers and supervisors. So if you think about smart buildings in general, there's a lot of focus on energy side of things, but building is not just about energy, right? There are a lot of pieces to it, and our solution actually pushes the boundary of what a smart building solution could be from an IoT point of view. We're already live in several different buildings and facilities across the country, like airports, manufacturing facilities, and so on. And it's been 3 years or so since we've been running this business. For myself, I've been in the sensing and analytics industry for like about 17 years, a couple of startups before this in the ag tech and healthcare industry. All right, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Simon Milner, CTO and co-founder of Petzila. Just a bit of background. You can probably tell I'm UK native, but I've been here in the Valley 22 years, 4 startups, had a chip guy by way of background, and had a long tenure at Marvell Semi, which provided the training required to go out and then launch into what I've called here today to share my experience is the Internet of Pet Things. At Petzila, we deliver a two-sided experience platform that serves both humans and animals. Internally, we developed all our own core components. We use Amazon AWS, but 4 years in, shipping for 2 years now in nationwide stores and nationwide retail, and happy to share the many challenges that we've had along that way.
Hello, everybody. I'm Amanjyot, and I'm with Nubryte. At Nubryte, what we've done is really reimagined the most overlooked part of your house, which is the light switch. And even though it's the most overlooked part of your house, it is the most interactive part of the house as well. Because every time you wake up every day, first thing you look out for is the light switch. Every time you enter a new space, you look out for the light switch. And before going to bed, you again look out for the light switch. So at Nubryte, we've cultivated this philosophy of integrating the light switch and making it as a hub for your smart home. And that is the entryway gateway that we see when it comes to connecting the entire home, and then from a single home you can connect entire communities and neighborhoods and regional areas as well. So at Nubryte, I handle strategy, and when I say strategy, it probably includes 4 different but very distinct areas, which are you have to be on top of your product, your customer, your channels, and also the investment side of things. So that's what I do at Nubryte. I've been in the Valley for almost 10 years now. I've worked with a variety of startups. I used to be at a search fund where we invested in a bunch of early stage as well as turnaround companies, and then restructured them and sold them off to whoever would be the best suitor. So I've done a lot of deal making, and I've also been on the entrepreneur side of things, where I started a pharmaceutical company, a biotech, where we were developing a drug candidate for supportive cancer treatment, and sold it to Pivot Pharma, which is a Canadian company. So I've worn very different hats, and absolutely love my present position with the Internet of Things. There's so much of opportunity, and as everybody else will tell you, so many more challenges to go with it. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So just kind of jumping into it right away, I think what will be really interesting for me, and I'm sure the audience to understand with this panel, is what does an IoT playbook look like, right? And I think you can look at investment today, and you go and talk to investors, and hardware is hard, right? Hardware is more expensive than software. And if I have $1 to invest, why would I not invest in 10 software companies at 10 cents each than giving one hardware company $1? And you're seeing things like Scully and Juicero and Lilly, kind of shaping the hardware space today. Kind of putting it out there, if you can build a playbook of how you started, what you're looking at now, and what are the challenges and opportunities looking forward, they'll be really interesting to understand. I'll go ahead and start with you, Junaith.
Yeah, I think that's always a challenge, the hardware versus software thing, right? So for us, as I said, we started at around late 2014, and it was, as everybody pointed out rightly, more about what is the value that we're going to get out from the solution that we're providing. So ours, as you can imagine, it's a 100-year-old industry, and the technology penetration is very, very minimal. It was really challenging for us to go there and talk to them and convince them that they don't have to send people to walk around and check each one of these dispensers, right? So many people have told us that, why would we not do that? That's the way we have done it all this time, right? So, it took a while for us to kind of convince them to say that, to show that, these data coming back from all of these dispensers and garbage bin and so on would provide them a value and would provide them a way to kind of do their current operation much better, right? And they can see an ROI in a reasonable period of time, say a year or 2 years, right, at the max. That was a major challenge as an IoT business, right? As for investors, I think it's all about traction. If you can show like a couple of big facility providers to that they are on board with your solution, then I think it becomes much more easier.
And just touching upon what you said a second ago of this 100-year-old industry, right? How do you actually attack them, right? How do you convince somebody that has been doing this for 100 years, per se, to bring on a technology like yours?
Yeah, I think you have to really prove it. I think the first step is to convince them for, say, a small rollout, right? And you got to find the right players as well, who is open to adopting and trying out new things, right? Which is by itself a hard challenge. And once you show the data, I think then things fall in place. It like almost like flipping a switch, right? And in those industries, it's really critical for someone in that industry to tell somebody else, you can go show data from a different building. They're not going to believe you. They have to hear from their own kind, quote unquote, right, before they kind of believe you and adopt your solution further.
And kind of back to that, what would you think about in terms of acquisition strategies for a kind of B2B market? How do you get in touch with these people that are your internal industry people to actually pitch your product?
Yeah, I think you have to, one, find believers who have been in that industry at very high executive level, bring them on board in advisory board or whatever. That's one strategy. You got to be out there, right? There are a lot of conferences that's very specific to facilities market, right? You got to be there, have your booth, talk to people, make them aware of this product.
And to your point that you made a little while ago around showing metrics to investors, right? How do you structure that? And obviously, dealing with these different things that are at play with the actual partners you have on the ground, with the actual devices you have deployed. Is it 10 devices, 100 devices? What does that actually look like? And what does it take to kind of get there too?
Yeah, easier way. I guess if you want to do that 10-second pitch and get their attention,
sure.
It's about, we are in this facility. It has to be a well-known facility. We have saved 30%. This market is 120 billion. Imagine 30% of 120 billion. Now they're ready to listen to you, right? And then you got to show, how your partnership pipeline looks like. Are you going to go to each building owner, or do you have a different strategy, right? All of those then comes in. Go-to-market strategy, basically.
Cool. So kind of moving to Simon, which is on a completely different side of the market, right? B2C is more of what I'd assume you're focusing on. Can you walk us through kind of a very similar question of how did you build Petzila? What were your insights when you were first building the product? And what are you seeing now, right? I think it'd be interesting to kind of draw that journey.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting journey. We started off originally with the premise of getting pets on the net. It seemed to me at the time, there's a lot of talk of the formation of the IoT space and the expansion of IP addresses connecting to inanimate objects. Certainly in my sphere, my cat was very much part of the family, so treated as a family member, and I had the desire to get her on the net and to be able to enable those same mobile and social activities and lifestyle that, of course, we humans take for granted. So in looking at that space, after really just more brainstorming, we chose the treat, the snack, as the connector, as the entry point, or the basically connector to get pets on the net. So having studied what is actually quite an in-depth area in animal training and behavioral analysis, over 100 years of studies there. Pavlov's dogs is probably the most well-known case, but there's a lot of studies around animal training, primarily through food, for changing behavior. And those have always been sort of conducted in very controlled lab environments. So the first MVP, the first validation piece of engineering that we had to do was to confirm that indeed we could recreate Pavlov's dog's associative conditioning and guarantee that the animal would be, in our case, in front of a video camera, a video stream. We had to, of course, enable audio to sort of close that loop. And in fact, our first MVP was literally
what is an MVP, by the way?
Minimum viable product. And so we had to first validate that we could, in fact, replicate that associative conditioning and Pavlov's dog sort of syndrome within the home. And we bought, at that time, and people talk about Arduino and Raspberry Pi. In fact, our MVP was a radio-controlled car, piece of electronics and PCB that we rejigged to drive the motor, spit the treat out, and then a separate IP camera. So it was a real mishmash. And that was something like, we built about half a dozen, and there were something like $25 worth of electronics and a piece of plastics from Fry's. That absolutely validated, and we saw rapid training. So literally within a couple of hours, you can see that both cats and dogs, in our case, that we studied, would react to a jingle, be in front of the camera, and wait in anticipation for that treat. So that was the sort of associative conditioning on the animal side, and then it was pretty clear that there was a very sort of joyful, mutual experience from the human side. We then went into a much more in-depth phase of building a product going into beta. That was heavy engineering for a year plus. And in our journey, we chose to leverage crowdfunding platform Indiegogo to go into beta. You talked about numbers. I don't know what the magical number is, but in our case, we went into beta across 32 countries and 700 homes.
Wow.
That we then went for a full 7 months without touching the product. Back in those days, I was customer support. A lot of issues, but we managed to work through those, and then 7 months later we launched into retail. That product is still shipping, so we've been out 18 months. We're in select stores. From a boutique perspective, we're in Best Buy, we're in Bed Bath & Beyond nationwide here in Canada, and currently in the UK, expanding into Europe this year. And whether by probably a combination of luck and good design, we enjoy a 4.2 rating on Amazon. The hardware has proven to be robust. I think some key elements, you've got to get the Wi-Fi sorted out. Wi-Fi in terms of just connectivity, that initial connectivity continues to be a challenge. You see a huge drop-off, and we monitor very closely using proprietary analytics to track that initial setup and Wi-Fi pairing phase. I won't give you the exact number, but there's a high percentage that hit one problem and just literally go away forever. So that's certainly an area for continued progress and focus to make that as seamless as possible. And then beyond that, just the traditional, the classic hardships of scaling through retail, I'd say is now the phase that we're in.
So I think it's common and apparent that obviously people are interacting with the software once the hardware has actually been installed, correct? And this is kind of a question for all of you, and I guess I'll start with you, Simon, just because you're here. What is the usage of software in your actual model, and how does that compare to once you get the device on the Wi-Fi? Yes. Right? What does the actual user experience look like, and what are the challenges there? Because obviously, as a hardware company, you're only developing the actual hardware. You're also developing the software. And so what is that, if you can answer that a little bit, talk to that.
Well, certainly in terms of R&D cost and focus, we're probably still a 90% software company. The hardware is a tool, but of course you have to get right. And so we've managed to create a very small team that manages the hardware and the operations. The real value is today in the software and the video experience, the joyful experience, just tactical things on the hardware, the noise of the motor, the ejection of the treats, initially scared, a percentage, a relatively small percent, but things that you need to work on. So a lot of fine tuning in the hardware domain, but massive value that can be layered at the platform level, and that's so. If the split on our side is 90-10, although you would of course view us very much as a hardware company.
Sure, Aman, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit. You said you were kind of focusing on 4 different areas. There's the product, the customer, the channels, and the investment, just in terms of strategy. Both kind of leading off with that software versus hardware question. What does that look like just in terms of experience of redefining what the light switch is, but then the kind of larger picture, what are these 4 areas that you're actually looking into? Yeah,
so let me kind of just take a step back and talk about your first question about how do you get a hardware company started, right?
Sure.
So I think the answer is you don't start a hardware company, or if your company is really dependent on some part of it on hardware, you don't really do it for a nice-to-have product. Your product should be a must-have need for every everybody in your target market. So unless you have that, there is really no point in starting it, because you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money in tooling and making sure that you're making a product and getting all the supply chains, and then the fad evaporates a couple of years down the line. So from Nubryte's perspective, Alan and Shan, who are the founders, their moment of aha came when their kids were growing up, and at the same time their parents were aging. So for both of those demographics, they needed home automation systems. Now, how do you make a product that caters to both of those audience sets? It's nearly impossible. So from there, the good thing about them was they came from an energy background, having worked in solar and semiconductors. So they just went back to the drawing board and started to look at the light switch itself. And light switch has been around ever since light has been around, and it hasn't gone through any disruption. So that's where they really had that moment of insight in saying that if this light switch, which is used by both their kids and their aging parents for all of their needs practically every day, that is the place to have the whole home automation system. Nothing else is going to work. So that's where they started off with, and have continued down the path. So to get, I mean, they both Alan and Shan are successful entrepreneurs in their own right, and they were able to pump in the money to get the initial product started. So they went to CES in 2015 with a prototype, and immediately they got the best IoT device award. And then 2016 happened, and what happened in 2016 was very interesting, because Amazon came out with Alexa, and it upended everything in the market. The whole dynamics changed, and now it was a matter of how do you really get software to be a real integrated part of the hardware that you've built out. So again, fortunately, they had this whole vision of really making software an integral part of the home automation system, because without that it cannot really work, because you can't have wires for integration every time. Companies like Crestron, Control4, they come in and install their home automation systems, and they practically rewire everything. So the idea of having a really strong software was always in the cards. And then we spent 2016 really retooling the entire stack and making sure that we are absolutely compatible with Alexa. So today we are integrated with almost all sorts of devices that you can think of. We call them point solutions because they do one thing very well, but they cannot do a second thing. And this year again we were at CES, where we were awarded the best whole home automation system. So we grew from a single product to a system. So what was initially just one light switch, which was touchscreen, now we have plenty of accessories and plenty of variants of that light switch. So we are really able to get into homes and wirelessly automate everything. So the cool features of this switch are it has a built-in. There are three things that make it really cool, actually. So first is, of course, the automated lighting. You don't have to rely on Philips Hue bulbs or dimmers to make that happen. It's all inbuilt in there. The second is security. Again, security comes packaged in. You don't have to pay to the likes of ADT for a subscription model. And the third is, if you have a larger home, there's an inbuilt intercom system where you can talk to your kids who may be on an upper floor, and you're downstairs in the kitchen waiting for them to come home and come to the dinner table, right? So those are things that are inbuilt. They have intrinsic and sticking value. So that's what the design philosophy was from day one of the company. And now we've integrated motion sensors into there. We have temperature and humidity sensors. We have energy monitoring and usage. We can connect to all sorts of appliances inside your home. And all of this is handled through Zigbee, Z-Wave, Wi-Fi. There are so many different challenges of integrating all of that. But I think we've done a reasonably good job in making sure that all of those things have been addressed at the design stage, so that once we start and we are already in full production mode. So we don't really have issues trickling down now where we are taken by surprise about something not working.
Cool. Sure.
Can I say something? Much like Simon pointed out, I think anybody who's looking at verticals in IoT at some point have to touch hardware, right? If it is a mature vertical, there's a good chance that you could find something out there that'll allow you to collect the data to do the machine learning and the user experience. But if it's not, if you're like, if you're like one of the first or the second to get there, then you don't have a choice. You have to have hardware, and hardware is in many ways the enabler for you to then build the rest of the system, right, to get value. So much like what Simon said, we see ourselves as a machine learning and software company focusing a lot more on the analytics and the user experience side of things. But hardware, we had to do that and make that as an enabler.
So if you were to, in the last few minutes that we have left, give the entrepreneurs in the audience, people that are looking at IoT, some words of wisdom or a statement of wisdom of, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in IoT, thinking about kind of your experience that you've built upon, what's the kind of statement that you give out there to somebody that's looking to jump into this space? Go ahead and start with you, Junaith. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, right, you have to first decide, are you doing horizontal or vertical, right? If you're doing vertical, like how we are, there are going to be lots of pieces. Be very clear on what your focus is going to be and try to look for off-the-shelf solutions or partnerships, right? Partnerships in a startup always challenging, but that's something worth trying, right? That's what we did for our gateways. Our specialty, after we built the sensing platform, right, we wanted to specialize more on the machine learning and the software side of things. We partnered with a company that provides a building IoT gateway. So that's one part.
Simon?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in a nutshell, I'd say understand your customers, make sure that their profile personas are built and well understood going into it, and then have a open mind and not only track the obvious functional usage, but think through and I have a hardware background, so I'll go back to hardware, although I just said, of course, there's 90% of the value and the focus is on layering that software. But in our case, I think it's borne out well for us. We have a lot of hooks that monitor and track beyond just the usage and be open-minded and forward-thinking in terms of having the insights to be able to reveal the behavior that you don't expect.
Let it evolve. Right.
And Aman, if you had just, I'd say, a sentence to say, what would you say?
I'd just throw out a bigger idea here in terms of opportunities. So I think the lowest hanging fruits have all been plugged. Now, when you think about IoT and home automation in particular, I think in the very near future, you would want to have an integrated home that integrates with your IoT in the car, that integrates with your IoT in the health space, that integrates with IoT in a smart living, smart city. So the biggest opportunities in the future kind of lie in machine-to-machine learning that all of these different ecosystems are now providing. So you have the ecosystem in the health space, you have an ecosystem in the home space, another ecosystem somewhere else, and all of those ecosystems have smaller machine ecosystems providing AI and machine learning stuff. So how do you get all of them to be working together? I think that's where the biggest opportunities lie.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for coming today, and thank you so much to the panelists. If you can tweet at us, you can find us. I think we're going to be mulling around on the outside. And enjoy your day at TiEcon. Thank you.
Thank you.